Hey guys, welcome to Unfostered. I'm your host, Marie. This is my co-host, my mama, Holiday.
Hello.
And you are watching or listening to Unfostered. We're so glad you're here. You know, we're going to be diving into good, real stories. The stories can sometimes be hard. That does not matter. This is a safe space. And in our safe space with us today is Josh, and he will be talking. How do you prefer to be? Because I know that you're in the ministry, you're a minister. So do you prefer Rev Josh? Do you prefer, what do you prefer?
Just Josh is
Just
fine.
Josh.
I
Just
wear
Josh.
many hats, and Josh is the common thread. We'll work with that one.
Sounds good. So I'd like to kind of talk about what it is you're doing now and then get right into it if you're comfortable. Are you comfortable?
Sure.
You good?
Absolutely.
I'm glad. I'm glad. So tell us about what it is you do right now.
Sure. Well, Marie, glad to be here, and really honored to be with you guys this afternoon. So I work with an organization called Fostering Hope, and my main role with Fostering Hope is helping engage churches and helping them to get involved in the child welfare space in whatever format they may take. So using training I've received as a TBRI practitioner to help individuals and families come alongside families and kids who are involved in child welfare in a way that is enduringly, practically compassionate. I think we can feel for people and with people as we hear their stories, and sometimes we don't know how to act and actually do something that brings hope and help to them in real tangible ways. And so a lot of my work involves equipping churches and families to work with kiddos who have been through trauma, loss, and separation, because their needs are the same and different, and it looks different. So helping them to see that difference and discern well how to care well.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. What started in your life that started you to wanting to be into this organization?
So backstory, I am a church planter, and in a church plant we had a few years ago, we were one of 4 foster families in a really small church, and we needed help. And so we reached out to Fostering Hope. I wasn't working for them at the time, and became acquainted with their work with families and churches and kids, particularly those in foster care. And so became familiar with Fostering Hope through that. But even before that, I'm an adoptee myself, and also a foster and adoptive and kinship parent. And so just had a heart for the needs expressed in homes that have come together because of foster care or adoption. And so sympathetic to those needs and how intense they can be, and knowing that we're not meant to do it alone. And so that was kind of my heart for the church, being a church that is the hands and feet of Jesus in these places, but also knowing what the kids and families need who are involved in child welfare, and how the needs are diverse and different.
You use the word equip,
Yes, ma'am.
and I feel like that word does not carry enough weight sometimes, because we have to be equipped to do this work. You have to be called by God, and he has to make you prepared to do this work. And so when you get into a position to where you're equipping others, you have to be equipped first. Right. And usually that comes from the things that we've gone through, and God takes those things and he uses them to equip us. So the word equip, that word, I know it but for me, it's heavy. It carries a lot of weight. I'd like to get into how God equipped you.
Sure.
Yeah. So are you comfortable with kind of going into that whole backstory and,
Let's dive in.
Yes.
Do it.
Yes. Let's do it. So tell us how you.
So my story is one I'm still unraveling and kind of detangling.
Yeah, that's fair.
I think the best way to go about it started at the beginning, I suppose. I was adopted from foster care at 2 months old, and I had some understanding even at an early age. My adoptive family told me very quickly. I don't remember not knowing I was adopted.
Oh wow! Wait, because I know most of the time when children are adopted, because you were adopted
at 2 months old.
2 months, so very, very young.
Very
so you
young.
could have just not known forever, but you knew that you were adopted.
And that's a two-edged sword, I think.
Wow.
Part of that is the knowing. I had a reason when I was 13 years old that I was a head or plus taller than my bio dad or my adoptive dad, and So it wasn't, I knew why. I looked nothing like anyone in my family. So there was some solace and comfort in that. But there's also the other side of that is having a narrative for my story that was perhaps one-sided. So, for example, I knew from an early age to be grateful for being adopted and all the good that came from that. The other side is that there's heartbreak, there's a loss that was, I think, knit in me, but I didn't have words or language for because I'd only been told the good and only been allowed to experience and explore the positive. If I hadn't been adopted, I wouldn't know so-and-so. I wouldn't have these grandparents or these experiences, and which is all true. And there was a deep longing, heartbreak, and loss that I didn't have words for because it happened before I even had explicit memory. I didn't have memories of my first parents. And so it wasn't until years later when, I was in my 30s and began to explore my own story with a different lens as I had my own kids, both biologically and from foster care. And it was actually in looking at my 13-year-old son from foster care that I began to see him holding up the mirror to my own heart, my own experience. And so it was then I began to explore more deeply and look into biofamily and hear my story from a different angle and see that my bio mother, when she was pregnant with me, didn't accept her pregnancy. Like she denied most of her pregnancy until it was about time to go. And so only 3 people knew I existed: my bio mom, my bio dad, and my bio mom's stepdad. And so there was a kind of a in utero suppressing of my voice and story. And I can see as a father to biological children how much love and care went into those 9 months of time in the womb for them, where I was praying for them. We were singing, we were talking to our kids and giving them prenatal care that I didn't get. And it wasn't until later on in my mid-30s when I began to compare and see the difference in what I was meant to get and be celebrated over versus kind of this downplaying, suppressing reality that I was born into.
So do you think that because it was because you were adopted into a good family and, you had all of those positive things, do you think that it was almost like you didn't have the space to be able to say, yeah, this is great and I appreciate this, but there's some hurt here, and so you weren't given the opportunity or the space to explore that?
Sure. I think that's a lot of what it was and what it felt like in hindsight. And yes, I think sometimes being, adopted into a middle-class white family as a white male, there's a lot of, privilege and opportunity that I was born into or adopted into. And at the same time, there's a lot of wallpapering I can think of where things looked better on the outside than they were on the inside, both in our family, but also in me. And I think the good upbringing masked and allowed me to mask a lot of that hurt and loss that I tried desperately to make up for in my youth and childhood and even adulthood. I'm still recovering from a lot of performance out of that abandonment, not wanting to be abandoned or rejected anymore. So I became everything I needed to be in my home of origin, in places and spaces where I walked and worked, and still to this day trying to rest in my true identity as a twice adopted son, both earthly adoption but also heavenly adoption, where I've got a good father and I can rest in that identity and not try to have other father figures accept me or look for my belonging from people and places that I have no business getting belonging from.
Yeah. So you kind of fought for belonging in those spaces and still, how transparent is it? Thank you for being so transparent about that, about saying I was 30 years old and looking at my own son, realizing, dang, like that hurt, it still hurts. And I never got a chance to even process that because when families adopt children that don't look like them, there is no camouflaging.
Right.
Right. And so you were given some space, even though you knew, but the world didn't know.
Right.
Like the world, there wasn't a conversation that needed to be had constantly. And that in itself is a double-edged sword, because that means that you got to put on the mask and a facade, like, bam, this is family, middle class, white family, doing great. And inside, it's just the pieces aren't coming together.
The disconnect was deep and real, and I think it took I did a lot of masking. I did a lot of denying and suppressing to try to keep all that together within me, again, so as not to cause problems or have too many needs. I think that's a big part of going from, being in the womb with my bio mother and having some needs suppressed, being put into a foster home for 2 months without a name, without a sense of home and belonging, and just kind of in the middle, in just waiting, and then adopted by a family that wanted me, and still, I learned, I was told from a young age, I didn't cry, I didn't express, I didn't have a lot. I was a joyful, happy baby, and while I think most parents would think of that as being a really good deal to have a child who doesn't cry too much, I can see in hindsight now, knowing what I know, that I had already learned at 2 months old to minimize my needs and to be happy and have a good disposition and a good countenance and be likable. And it was so deeply and early programmed in. And that's been the hardest battle, I think, like you said, Marie, because there weren't some obvious signs, there weren't some obvious disconnects or brokenness. It was all very, what I've learned, I took a term from an author named Catherine Wolfe, who early on had she was a young mom and had some strokes that really, obviously created some big challenges in her life. And she calls them invisible wheelchairs, ambiguous losses, or things that slow us down and limit us, but may not be obvious to the world around us. If it's a visible wheelchair, as she has, and she's like, look, everyone knows where I stand or how I get along, and it's clear and apparent. And sometimes there's an advantage to having something you can point at tangibly and say, oh yes. And I think for many adoptees, there's a lot of invisible losses and invisible wheelchairs where we feel limited. I felt limited. I felt incapable, not enough. And yet on the outside, I looked quite the opposite. Very strong, very capable, very powerful. And I lived up to that and it worked so well until it didn't.
Yeah.
And then are you left with the pieces, right?
Wow. And I mean, the way that you tell your story, I can still see how it is very glossed over, because you said that you went to a foster home for 2 months with no name.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, even though you were a baby and there was no way for you to remember that, there's no way for that to be taken from you.
Right.
And people are named when they're born. And so to be anywhere, and I'm just imagining the foster family referring to you as the baby, because you don't have a name. Why is that making me emotional? You deserved that.
Mm-hmm.
And even the denial from mom very early on. I mean, I'm doing this podcast with my mother, with my bio mom, but know that it took a lot to get to this space.
Right.
So I know what rejection feels like, but I didn't even feel that rejection that early on. There was no way for me to. I was named Marie as soon as I was born, and you were named Josh after.
Later. And a beautiful name. I'm grateful for that name.
I think it's a great name.
God
You
is
look
Savior.
like Josh.
I think I am a Josh. And yes, and I have a, compassion for my bio mom who was scared and had nowhere to go and didn't have answers for questions she had. And so I can hold space for what she was experiencing and not hold ill will or forgive. And that's been the journey I've been on recently, is learning to forgive things that I didn't even have words for. And sometimes even things that weren't intentional. And forgiveness is so powerful, but hold space and forgive her for not giving me space and a name and love, but rather I was an object of fear and cursing in a way. So there's a story in scripture I've really come to identify with, and it's of a guy named Mephibosheth. Not a great dude to name your kids after because it's hard to say that name. I can't think of, but he's one I've come to identify with quite a bit. Mephibosheth's story is one where he was the son of King Jonathan, and grandson of King Saul, and he lost his dad and his grandfather in a battle. They're killed in one day, and in the old times, when the kings die or the king and the heir die, like that's chaos. And so he was orphaned, and then his nurse, his caregiver, tried to get him out of the palace and out of the country because they wanted to protect his life. And in the process of fleeing, he gets dropped and breaks his leg. His foot is maimed. And so from the rest of his life, he is an orphan living outside of the place where he was meant to live, with physical, limitations and evidence of being dropped. And I think a lot of adoptees, and I feel this way too, and it's not often like that woman who was carrying him out of the castle, carrying him out of the kingdom, was doing the best she could to save his life and still dropped him because it happens.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of adoptees feel dropped in a sense by their adoptive families. Not necessarily intentionally. Sometimes it's intentional, but just mishandled. And our stories aren't properly cared for or regarded. And so we're kind of made to feel like we should be able to fit in and make it work when we're walking with a limp. And that's, I think, how I felt for many, many years, and I'm learning to own that limp now and say, yes, I've been dropped. I've had some moments of being mishandled, and there were moments in crucial formative times, and that makes a difference. And just as Mephibosheth's story doesn't end in that limitation, he gets invited by King David to share the table of the king. It says, no longer will you be over there cast off. You're actually coming to my table, and I'm going to give you all of your father's land. Everything that was reserved to you, reserved for you, is yours, but you'll never have to worry about that anyway because you're going to be at my table.
Yep.
And I think that's been the flip side of that script, is saying, I have a father who says, Josh, this is your spot at the table, and it's never going anywhere. And so that's where I'm learning to press in more and more, is to stop looking for other tables, to find my place and to fight my way and elbow my way in and force my way there, but rather I've been invited to the table.
Come on now.
And I'm never going anywhere. So I think that's been the part of my development as a man, as a son, is saying, I don't have to fight for the spot. And my father's never going to look at me sideways and say, ooh, I'm not going to kick you out, but I kind of wish you weren't here. Because that's been my fear. It's like, I don't want to sit at the table because what if he says, oh, maybe I don't really want you. I'm not going to kick you out because I don't go against what I do. Yeah. But I don't really want you here. And learning that, no, he does want me. And no, I can't change that. So that's been the part of my story I'm trying to press into more and more, is my story doesn't begin with the trauma. It doesn't begin with the loss or the suppression. It begins with glory. It begins with God before I was ever born, knowing my story and saying, you were made for me.
Yeah.
You were made from love, for love, by love. And that's where the beginning is. And that's also where the ending will be. And so in the middle, I'm learning to trust that identity more and more. But it's been every day, Marie. Every day I got to wake up and accept. And it's like 51st dates, where she has to wake up and accept, okay, I've got amnesia. I have a whole story that happened before me. And today, this is where I am. And I have to, I think every day I have to go through and accept this is where I've been. This is the fighting I've done to try to be somewhere I don't have to be. And yet this is also where Jesus has brought me, and I don't have to wrestle that anymore. I can accept and But it is a daily battle, and it probably will be until I die. But
I mean, I literally, if you had asked me who Mephibosheth, I'm saying it wrong, right?
Mephibosheth.
But if you had asked me who Homeboy was, I never could have told you. However, I have read that story. And so when you started saying it, I was like, oh, I know this story. I just didn't know Homeboy's name. But
Easy name to forget.
I love the redemption in that story, that he got everything that was owed to him, even though it looked, I mean, like you said, he lost his family. He was taken to a foreign place. You know, nowadays, we make sure we take care of, we should all be making sure we take care of those in need, those who are impaired in some form. Back then, they didn't. So he went through all of that, but in it, he ended up okay. He ended up blessed. So sometimes you just got to hang on in there.
Sure.
And I'm sure Mephibosheth, okay. I'm sure there were times where he was like, yeah, no, this sucks, and this can't be what's for me. And if he had knowledge, I'm sure he had to have some pain in that. Like, my family was royalty. I had all of these things, and I don't get to enjoy any of those things. And I meant, my goodness.
How much bitterness had to be overcome by him. And his story is a weird one because it doesn't end at the table of David. I think he makes some bad decisions, and we can kind of see how trauma impacts our ability to even receive the grace, the overwhelming grace we receive sometimes. And but there were decades of time between being orphaned and dropped to having that restorative scenario unfold. And so I think being invited to the table doesn't undo those decades.
Right.
The goodness of what we might experience on earth restoratively or in heaven eternally isn't meant to erase our stories, but rather give a deeper purpose and meaning and beauty that when they do get redeemed, they don't simply get thrown under the rug. It all gets made good, and that's the good news we're pressing into. Even this morning, I was reading in John the story of the man born blind, and his disciples asked Jesus, "Hey, who sinned that this man was born this way?" And he said, "Nobody. That wasn't the idea. He was born this way that God might be glorified in him." And even that blind man went decades of experiencing the world in darkness, and yet. So this moment might come where he can enjoy the light to the glory of God. And so I think that's the opportunity, invitation I'm learning to say yes to is, okay, all this is true. I think because Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life, reality is our friend. We don't have to hide or mask. We don't have to minimize our needs, our stories, our hurts, our wounds in order to be accepted or to survive anymore. We can be fully honest because God fully sees and fully knows and fully loves and restores. So, I think I've went a long time, 35 years, minimizing and downplaying. Oh, I was only spent 2 months in foster care, not years, as even my children have. But to say those were crucial moments.
They were. And
I don't have to compare my story with anyone else's to minimize or be bigger than anyone else's. This is my story, and this is what I feel. I feel sad and lost and alone so often, and it's something that my adult life has been a major wrestle, a major struggle. My wife can tell you it's hard being married to someone who feels so lonely, so it's caused its own problems, own ripple effects, and yet by God's grace, we're all moving forward one day, one step at a time.
Isn't that something when you can feel lonely, even though you're surrounded by people that love you, and people that haven't been through it don't understand it?
Right.
They don't understand. There are times where I love that God has blessed me with my family. And I'm talking about my husband and my children. And I'm even so grateful that he restored me with my family, with my bio parents. But there are still times where I have to step off because I'm dealing with those things. And I've healed and I've forgiven and I've done all these things. And there are still times where I'm like, I'm not feeling it, y'all. And I can't tell my husband or my children what that feels like because it's indescribable. And they've never
hurtful.
experienced that.
Right. Because it can hurt the ones we love and who
Yeah.
love us.
Yeah.
When we say, I'm feeling lonely right now. Well, they're, my wife
I'm
and
right
kids.
here.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was really jarring for my wife in particular when we kind of discovered, as I was going through therapy, that I feel so utterly alone, or have felt so utterly alone. And it's not her fault. She's done. In fact, when I went through training to become a TBRI practitioner, they do an attachment test, attachment assessment to see what is your adult attachment style. And so they look back at your, origin and look at some stories, and they tell you what your attachment was you came into, and they tell you what it is now. And, there was, I forget what my attachment level would have been or what it was like in my home of origin, but I think disorganized or anxious attachment was what I came into. And through this assessment, the assessor said, hey, but you have a secure attachment now. And she pointed out it's likely due to your wife. And so my wife is super instrumental in my healing. And so I can understand the pain she feels when she hears like, oh, but I feel lonely.
Yeah.
And it's not her fault. It is a deep down mechanism of feeling like no one understands, and I have to kind of suppress a lot of who I am to survive. And then, there's just like, I'll come home and I'll start doing things on my own, like just cleaning or working, and have to pause and say, no, this isn't my task to do by myself. It can be so subliminal and so small. It can look so good to the outside world that I'm getting things done. But the reason I'm doing it is because deep down, the message is I'm doing this. I'm by myself. No one's going to help. I'm on my own. So I've got to do this.
Oh my God.
And it is such a subtle, but really damaging way to live, because relationships don't work that way. If I'm coming in lonely, I can't show up well for the people who I love. And so it's been really probably one of the biggest battles of my life to feel the sadness of my story and to cope with the loneliness and say, I'm no longer alone. I'm not alone. I never was.
Yeah.
That's the big thing. I never was alone, but I definitely don't have to be anymore because I'm not. So seeing how that's impacted my family has been really sobering and heartbreaking for me to say, wow, it just takes a great deal of love and patience and care that they have for me to walk with me through that loneliness.
I mean, there's that connection. There's always so there are times where, because I didn't have a lot growing up. And so people are always like, you're so creative.
Right.
You're so creative. You get so many things done at one time. But I realized that that's actually a trauma response.
Right.
I'll literally, and I realized it was happening a couple of weeks ago, and I identified it and I went, oh, shoot, Marie, you're being manic. And calling myself manic when I don't have any of those other, I'm not bipolar, I'm not all of these things. But I realized, whoa, hey, stop. I was literally doing my hair. And I don't go to any place to get my hair done. I don't go to any place to get my nails done. If I need clothes made, I'll make my own clothes. I make furniture. I do all of these things. And it's always looked at like, wow, that is so awesome. But I realized this day, I was doing my hair, I was doing my eyebrows, I set the stuff out to do my nails. This is all at one time, mind you. I set the stuff out to make dinner. My daughter bought these picture frames and they look terrible. And so I was redoing those at the same time. And then I went, oh, I need to paint that mirror. So I'm painting the mirror. But I have 15 things going on at one time. And then I was like, oh, I really need to sweep. And then I said, well, while I'm sweeping, let me just go ahead. I'll put the broom down real quick and put the biscuits in the oven again. And I said, oh, shoot. Oh, shoot. You have a whole network. You have a whole set of family that you can say, hey, can you put that in there while I do this? And while she's doing that, I could delegate.
Right.
They'd help me.
Yes.
But that's not where my brain went. My brain went to, let me get everything done at one time. And then I'm just going. And I went, oh, wait, this is not normal. Calm it down. Leave the biscuits where they are. Your daughter can put those in
Ask
the
for
oven.
help.
put the broom down, because for them, for our family, it's not just about asking them for help. It's about bringing them into my
Right.
space. And so that's something that I was not doing. I have a question. So you mentioned that you made space for forgiveness and, all of that for your bio mom. I had to make that space too. And Holiday knows, like, I had to be very intentional. And I know you can tell sometimes I call her Holiday instead of mom. We talked through how it doesn't naturally flow all the time with mom. And we're comfortable there. She's actually comfortable with me calling her mom now,
Yeah,
when
or
she wasn't
Holiday.
at first, or Holiday. Yeah, but
I wasn't comfortable with her calling me my name at first.
but how did it look like when you reconnected with bio mom? Like, how old were you? How was that? How did your adoptive family feel? Like,
Yeah, that's a lot. There's a whole big story there. So I think it was while we were in the process of becoming licensed to foster, and I first heard, not first, but I heard for the first time. I think I listened before, but actually it soaked in this time. Dr. Karen Purvis, TBRI, she was the one who pioneered a lot of the child psychology. It's really helpful for those who are caring for kids who have experienced trauma, loss, and separation. And she had this video, and she mentioned that trauma, you may think of it, we tend to think of it, and I did, as, the teen who shows up at your door who's been in foster care. It also is, she said in this one video, the infant who has been separated from mom and dad early on. And so I began to see, oh no, that's me. There is something here. And so I was like, I need to do some exploring of this story. And so this was in 2015, I believe. And the agency I was adopted through wanted a lot of money to begin exploring who my bio family might be. And I didn't have the money for that, or at the time this in a big old thick packet. And I was like, I don't have time for this. And I happened to find, or my wife found on Facebook, a group dedicated to helping people find bio family. And I think it was some folks who really nerd out over Ancestry.com and looking at court records. And so I gave them a little information I had. And within a day, they had sent me a message on Facebook. Hey, here are the Facebook profiles of your bio mom, bio dad, bio brother.
wow.
I knew I had 2 half siblings before I was born, but I didn't know that I had a full blood bio brother born 4 years after me. And so that was a revelation. And so I began to reach out and connected with my bio brother and bio dad. My bio mom was not contactable. I don't know. There was something going on there, and I didn't connect with her until years later. But I met my bio brother and bio dad one summer day in College Station. That was halfway between where we lived and where they lived. And it was bizarre. Even looking at the Facebook profile of my bio brother, he and I look very similar.
Wow.
And it answered the question of what would I have been like? Because I always, as a child, I'm in bed at night just imagining who is this other me that would have been had I not been adopted. And I got to answer that question because he looks just like me. I think if we'd seen each other in the street, passing each other, we would have both fainted because the resemblance is uncanny. And he's just East Texas version of me, I found out. But it was very interesting. It was good. It was sad because I think I felt a connection with my bio brother in particular that I hadn't felt before. That I think is just there naturally. And it also kind of, it's a scary feeling. It's an insecure feeling, I think, as well as an adoptee. I felt this way because I felt I should have had that with some people in my adoptive family.
Yeah.
And to have a space for, I didn't have a space for this, or category for the connection you feel with someone who is fully blood, your relative. I did experience it when we had our bio daughter, our firstborn. I was like, oh, this is someone who, has my DNA. It was the first time experiencing that. But when I met my bio mom, it was actually, my bio brother got married and he asked me to be the officiant at his wedding, which was hilarious. Great, awkward, and all sorts of kinds of things. Because I think so many people in my bio mom side of the family didn't know I existed. I told you 3 people knew.
Yeah, that's crazy.
And so I think half the family didn't have the same amount of time to cope with this
Right.
new information. And so we're at this wedding, and I'm officiating my brother's wedding, and in walks, a whole bunch of people that I know exist but don't know. And so it was very awkward. There's a lot of stories there that could be told, but when my bio grandmother was like, "Hey, so good to meet you. And we didn't know you existed until like a week ago. And so please pardon our mess as we figure out how to, deal with this."
Yeah.
And, but it was good, because it did answer a lot of questions and bring some closure, to that. And so we had a few conversations. There hasn't been much in the way of, connecting with bio family since. My bio brother, we text from time to time. I think it was good enough to just see them and know them and have a few conversations on the phone after that. Answer, my bio mom had questions for me. I had questions for her. And we left it at that. And, I don't think I don't feel a need to go back and have that connection with her. I don't think she's maybe even ready to have it with me. So it is what it is. And I've had to kind of mourn that. I think a part of me hoped that there would be some form of relationship there. Because again, I was looking for parent figures to say, to accept me fully. And it was okay that it wasn't them. I think it ended up being okay. But there was a kind of second set of mourning that had to happen when part of me that wanted there to be more didn't get that. So it was good for what it was. And grateful to see stories of more of a full relationship that's had time to kind of flourish between you and your mom. And what a beautiful picture of what God can do with him involved and with that time.
But where Josh spoke about the feeling that he had with, meeting his mom for the first thing and everything, I didn't. I've gotten so many stories about, why she put me in a foster care in the first place, that it's in a confused state because I don't know what to believe. I don't know to believe this story. Then she'll come up with another story. Then I'll hear another story.
You're referring to your bio.
I'm referring to my bio mother.
Yeah.
I know. When I first met my bio mother, like you said, it was a confusing state. Whereas I was adopted by a family member, and my mother would come over, but at the time I didn't know she was my mother.
How confusing.
I just thought she was just a relative. I didn't really know that she was my mother. And when I had one of my siblings to come over and stay the night with me, I didn't know that he was my brother.
Oh,
I just thought he was my auntie had a lot of clients. I thought he was one of her clients' sons. I didn't know he was my brother.
Oh, wow.
And when I did get a chance to meet my brothers and sisters, I was like, it was wild. It was amazing to me. I'm like, you came from my mother and you came from my... And then when I did meet my biological father, that was off the chain. I couldn't, I just walked up, knocked on the door and said, I'm such and such a... do you remember such and such a lady? Well, I'm your daughter. And it still ended up in a really bad relationship between me and him. Mm-hmm. But just to meet him for that first time I wanted to ask so many questions. I wanted to know so much, and I didn't. I didn't get the answers that were really meant to be told. Mm-hmm. Because also from him, I asked him, he said, he was trying to find me, and my mother gave him so many stories about what was happening, what was going on, and then yet for him, I got different stories and just a whole mix of things from telling me what was going on. And I was like, because my father was in a associated gang and all of this, I was like, but still, I was your child. Mm-hmm. When, even though I got all these other siblings, why didn't you, try to find out more about me? And he was like, this was more important, and I was doing this, so that was more important than me. Mm-hmm. And yet I still have a lot of unanswered questions that I get unnecessary answers to, so I'm still in a kind of like a confused state, when it comes to biological parents. And but also yet too being in foster care and you growing up, you loving the person
Well,
that you love.
you were in kinship placement, so not quite foster care. So my aunt actually raised my mom, and she thought that my aunt was her biological
Wow.
I did.
mother, and she didn't know that her mother was her biological mother. So it's a little bit different.
Very disorienting.
Right.
It's very confusing.
Yes, and I don't know that that makes it any better, because once you find out, then you're like, because I know you said before, there were times where you saw Grandma Yvonne and you didn't know that she was your mother. So
Right.
she would be in settings where my grandmother was there and she didn't even, you said she didn't even speak to you. Like she didn't talk to her or
didn't know.
anything. So
No, she
she
didn't
didn't know. And so,
She didn't give me the love and the
No.
comforting that I was supposed to get.
yeah.
And when you're sharing that story of what you experienced, it reminded me, I think a lot of our parents, well, I hear in your story, I can only imagine that your bio mom and bio dad felt immense amounts of shame for either for having you or for treating you the way they did. I don't know if that's what they felt or not, but I know that oftentimes, and I think this is what my bio family experienced, was a feeling of shame. That's why my mom hid me. She didn't want to own that she was pregnant at such a young age, and it wasn't acceptable, wasn't good. And so I think there's a transfer that happens, and this is kind of that cursing I mentioned earlier, of shame, where we absorb the way we're supposed to. As infants in utero, we're supposed to absorb nutrients and the positive calming hormones that our biomothers are giving off as they're nurturing us, even in their own body. And when that doesn't happen, we still absorb what they're giving us, even if it's shame. And there's a sense of shame that we, I think, are born into and put on like a jacket that we later on have to learn to take off and say, they may have meant this, that, or the other. They may have felt shame about me existing, or you existing, or how they treated us for giving us up and not doing, what maybe in their minds a more courageous thing of keeping us when it was courageous. I can think it takes a great deal of courage to bear a child all the way. I think that's a choice, that is really difficult for a woman to make, to go all the way and bear a child that you don't know if you're going to be able to care for.
Right.
But I think one thing we get to do is unshackle ourselves from that shame that our parents have maybe placed on us. That's not ours to own. That's theirs.
Right.
You sound like Marie, Josh. You sound like Marie.
But I mean, as like I said, story when I finally did notice, my mother, and I asked her, so many questions. So the answers were, okay, well, your dad was doing this, and so we had to give you to this person. And then another story is where you were extremely young and you always cling to her. So I'm like, you say drop the shackles and chains. I'm still, even as older as I am, I still have shackles and chains still on me because I don't really know the truth. But luckily, I am still able to move around and accept my life
Right.
as it is.
And that's all we can do. One thing we've learned in parenting, our own children, including some who came to us through foster care, is we aren't responsible for what happened to us. We can't change that. We can accept it. We are responsible for how we respond. And so, to the best of our ability, and with God as our help, we can do the redemptive, restorative work for those around us. And I can put myself in proximity to God and say, I need you to redeem and make this good. And I need your help to do likewise, because it ends with me. I'm not passing this on. And I think for those of us who come through multiple families, biological and adoptive, we have two sets of generational cycles or more that we have to reckon with.
Yeah.
And forgiveness, going back to that theme, Marie, is, when the Lord teaches us how to pray, he says, forgive us, teach us to say, forgive us our debts as we forgive those indebted to us. And when we are breaking those cycles, we are saying the cost of their actions and their wounding ends with me. It falls on me. And I'm not going to hold it against them or retaliate against them. I'm also not going to kick the can down the street and pass it on to anyone else. So the hurt and the wounding falls on me. I am owning the cost of that. And because we have this great high priest in Jesus who says, oh, also, I'm going to take that from you. I'm going to bear your cost. We get to join him in that. And that's the invitation we have, so that forgiveness becomes us saying, I'm not minimizing the hurt that I feel because of what they have done. I am owning it and saying it ends here. And by the grace of God, I'm going to forgive and even keep forgiving, because like that recurring dream or recurring liturgy of waking up and having to accept, there's times I have to forgive.
Yeah.
Because the pain still feels raw. And that's not an indictment or an accusation against my ability to forgive. It's an opportunity to go deeper into God's love for me. And as I forgive, I'm able to experience freedom more and more. But it is a residual thing. We don't retire from that or graduate from that. We have to constantly be invited into, and it still hurts today.
Yeah.
And so I've got to forgive again. And I find myself lost and disoriented today. So I've got to go find where's home?
Yeah.
Where's home? And I've got to go home. And that's, Psalm 27. A friend or somebody I met recently, an adult adoptee, pointed this out as the adoptee psalm. And it says, I want to be in your sanctuary, in your home. I find home in you. I'm paraphrasing, but this idea of like, I do have a home. I do have a permanent residence, and it is with a good and perfect Father who won't spurn me or feel embarrassed or put shame on me, but rather welcomes me with open arms and ascribes to me blessing.
Yeah.
Where once I felt cursed. So there is freedom, and we get to learn every day how to let go of those chains, sometimes again and again, because I pick them up again.
Sometimes you pick them up by accident too.
Oh, sure.
Because I've been in a space where I'm like, okay, I forgive my mama, I forgive my dad, I'm good with all of it. And then I find myself sad or hurt, or like there was a time where I almost came to blows with my mother. Literally, I told you we're very transparent here, but when my sister died, all of that, my oldest sister passed, and she was in addiction. Like, she had repeated the cycle. And so when she died, all of the forgiveness I thought that I had, all of the things I thought that I had moved past came rushing back. And so my nephew was actually here, and my mom was kind of fussing with my nephew, and I went to 100.
Right. And
it was because I was expressing that hurt, because I was always the one that it didn't matter what was going on. I was like, even with my younger sister, I'm like, well, we got to forgive her. We got to do this. We got to do that. And so I wasn't really dealing with it the way that I thought I was. So when that pain came rushing back when my oldest sister passed, and I'm looking at her not getting along with my oldest sister's child, I'm like, yeah, but this is all your fault. Like, it's all of it came rushing back. So much so that I'm so grateful to God that my husband was there, and he was like pulling me back, and he was like, Marie, stop. And like, I was a whole different person, because when I was younger, I used to fight a lot. I'm not gonna lie. But I'm not a violent person. But when I tell you the rage that I felt, even when because I was in her house when I was arguing with her, I did everything, including threw a cross at her. Okay. And so when I got outside of the door and away from her, I could see what was happening. Like, it was clear, it was evident to me that this is a spiritual attack, but it wasn't evident to me in the moment. And so when I got outside of that space, I went to stand up, and as soon as I did, I started throwing up. And I was like, oh my gosh, I don't know what this is. And I told God, I was like, you know what, God, I'm comfortable with not having a relationship with her.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want it. I don't want to deal with the stress. I don't want to deal with the headache. I don't deal with this with my own kids. I am a chain breaker. I am not going to bring this home. All of those things. And I was really upset with myself for getting so upset with her. Right. And so when she came back into my space, because I went a while without talking to her. And one day I look up, and she was just at the house. And literally, I'm like, okay, well, I'm past it. I'm not talking to her. I'm comfortable in the space I'm in right now. I'm good.
Right.
And so when she showed up, all of the I'm good went out the door again.
Right.
And I was like, why are you here? Like, just so angry. And then I was like, Marie, you're not dealing with this. And so you really need to deal with it. And so we had to have a really hard but honest conversation.
Yes.
And the way that it was going to work, even with my children, like, you know, and I'm not making you feel weird, right? Like,
No,
this is all what.
this is true.
Even with my children, I had to tell her, hey, this is how you're supposed to love them. And I didn't understand why she didn't know how to love them. And then I was like, well, she didn't know how to love you. So how do you expect for her to, but she was receptive at that point, because when we had that hard conversation, I was like, if this is how it's going to be, then we need to just stay away from each other, because I want to be obedient to God's word. God said, honor thy mother and thy father. It didn't say honor them when they're doing good. It didn't say honor them when they've taken care of you. It didn't say honor them when they love you. It said to honor them. And so if I need to stay away from you to honor you, then that's what needs to happen. Or we learn how to love each other for who we are right now and really deal with these things. And what changed it for me was her taking accountability. When she took accountability and she owned those things, then I could move forward. And, you know, but we had to have a really hard conversation, and it was not easy. And I'm telling you, I'm sorry that I did. I'm still sorry that I did that. Like I was so outside of myself, but all of that pain, like I kept saying, oh, I'm past it. I'm good. And I wasn't.
No.
And I wasn't.
All that pain that she was feeling that was so suppressed inside, she had to just let it go.
Right.
You know, and if she was letting it go onto she was going to let it go onto someone.
Right.
Unfortunately, it was me, but if she was going to let it go, it was going to come out eventually.
Right.
And I was glad that it did come out. Yeah, we went through a lot trying to get it back.
Sure.
And see, but I wasn't raised to feel that. I didn't know I wasn't raised to love her. I wasn't raised to love myself. I wasn't raised to love nobody else. So I didn't know, you know, but when she started feeling that, then the feeling started coming on to me is where, oh my goodness, I need to really start paying more attention of what's going on with me too, you know, and this is my child. I got to pay that, give myself to that too, you know. But I can't give that if I can't help me.
Right.
You know.
And what an amazing, because I think about this a lot as I parent, and we mess up so often, and we say sorry and we own it. And I think we do the work to reconcile, which is what I'm hearing from you guys. Like, forgiveness is one thing. Forgiveness frees the one who's been wounded. Reconciliation requires both parties courageously stepping in, and usually the one who did the wounding has to do the work of saying, this is what I've done to you. I am not just admitting it, I'm owning it, and I'm going to do the work to reconcile and make it right. And that your willingness to, in spite of, or even because of perhaps your own story, which, you know, hearing the disruption between you two, going back even further into your family of origin, like your willingness to say, I hear you, and, you know, we're going to keep going. I'm going to show up, and I'm going to try something different than was done for you. You stepped somewhere where your parents didn't go. And that's why y'all are here today. And what a beautiful thing. And that is a gift that I know most adoptees would love to have from bio family, if possible, even adoptive families. Because I think, you know, the bypassing that we experience, I mentioned wallpapering, and I think, you know, you mentioned the forgiveness, and I hear spiritual bypassing, which I did, you know, when I became a follower of Christ, I just took Bible verses and joined in the wallpapering on my own story and put Bible verses on things to make the narrative good when it hadn't really been made good yet. And so that's what carried me 3.5 decades into life without actually getting to the depth. And so the opportunity, the invitation is like, okay, I don't have to fake, you know, this anymore. I can be honest and real. And maybe that means that I get to enjoy depth of relationship with people that wounded me, but maybe it doesn't. And maybe that's okay, because then I get to show up more wholly and fully with people who are going to say, we see you, we're here, we're not going anywhere. But if we're bypassing or suppressing, we're not going to get there with anybody, much less ourselves and God. But what you guys have done and what you've let God do through you is a
It's
real
definitely
gift.
by his grace. It's definitely, and he gets big props for that because it was so hard to say, darn it, I'm almost 40 years old and I'm still mad and I thought I was over it. My mom had moved from Chicago to Texas and she was still very much so in her addiction, and I was praying for her, and when she started doing good and being sober, I was like, bam, we're perfect, we're good, and we weren't. And so it's a part of that wallpapering. And even when you were saying, when you were saying words from the daily prayer and debts, another translation is trespasses. We forgive those who trespass against us. The only way you can forgive them if you make the acknowledgement that they trespassed to begin
You
with.
gotta own it.
They had no business being in that space. They had no business doing that to you. That it didn't say forget it.
Right.
It said forgive
Yeah.
it, because you've trespassed, whether you knew it or not, onto somebody else, and they need to be able to forgive you, so you need to be able to forgive. And shackles and chains are heavy and hard, and so when you forgive them for you. And then when you forgive somebody for yourself, it brings them into that space so that they can say, oh, let me see what it is you're doing. I want to feel that.
Right.
I want to feel that joy, because joy comes from the Lord, and no man can give it, so no man can take it away from you. And so there's a joy in the relationship. Now, it is not perfect.
Right.
And there's often times where I have to actually talk to my mom like one of the kiddos, like, because she has some things that have gone on,
We're all still in process.
Yeah. But we're comfortable with the relationship,
And I can listen too.
yeah. Now it's a lot different, but God had to come in and reconstruct that. So for you, tearing down that wallpaper and exposing it, because wallpaper is put up on walls to cover up something
Right.
that you don't like.
Right.
So when you start tearing it down, you have to visibly be able to see that. And so if you could give us a word for people who, because you're in the process still. All that wallpaper's not down yet, right? You're working through it. And so if you could give us something for people to take with them who is in the same space. Speak to the Josh that's out there right now to close us out.
Yeah. So if I were to talk to me, I would say reality is your friend, because Jesus is the truth. We don't have to be afraid of what's behind that wallpaper. I think I kept it up because I was afraid of what I was going to see. Because if it's really that bad, I'm going to be rejected. No one's going to want that. No one's going to want what's behind those walls, behind the paper. And so what I would say to me is, keep going. Tear on the wallpaper. You're not as alone as you think you are. And whatever is revealed on the other side, it's like a surgeon has to see in order to heal, in order to mend. And that's exactly what the Lord does when he wounds us by opening things up. Is I'm going to open up so I can close it the right way and bring healing. And so there's freedom and there's peace and joy, like you said, on the other side of that wallpaper. And reality, we can be honest. We can see it for all it is, because God is going to make it good.
Amen. Amen. And thank you for being so transparent in that. I know it's not easy let's just keep it a buck, for white male middle class in America to be able to say, hey, it looks great, but this hurts.
It hides a lot.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes,
Yeah.
ma'am. Thank you all so much for having me. It's been a
Thank
joy to talk to you all
you.
today.
Thank you. We actually want you to be able to come back if you're comfortable.
Absolutely.
When some more of that wallpaper gets down, and then we can see where you are. You have been a blessing. Thank you for being transparent. And I hope you felt safe in this space, because I told you we're cousins now.
Yes.
Like when I found out you were in it, I was like, I don't care if you went for 2 days into foster care. That means we're cousins. We're here.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Glad to be part of the family.
Yes.
Yeah.
You never have to be alone, even in those spaces. And I'm going to tell you this real quick. Even in those times where you feel alone, even when you're covered with all of your family surrounding you, if you need to say, hey, Marie, this sucks.
Yeah.
I'm not going to tell you, no, it doesn't. I'm going to say, okay, it sucks, and let's sit in that together.
Right.
So we can pray our way through so that we can be okay, because I get you. I got you.
Thanks, Marie.
Okay.
I trust. I believe.
Well, I appreciate you all for being with us today on Unfostered. I always feel so blessed at the end of this, because I have people like Josh who are willing to tell their stories. I know there's a Josh out there. There's a Joshette. There's a girl who's a Josh too. you guys reach out, talk about it. It is okay. You are not alone. Okay. You were never alone anyway, but you're not alone. Okay. Thanks for watching. Bye.